There's this little line that appears at the end of movies and books and old fairy tales, one that reaches back centuries into the depths of the human experience. And so they lived happily ever after. This one line follows up countless love stories after the big Act 3 confession and the characters get together and they admit their love for each other, once they realize everything is going to be just fine. This little line didn't exist until 1702. Well, it didn't exist to refer to love or happy endings. I'll just have you hold that thought in the back of your head. While you mull that over, I'd like to tell you about a little game called Florence, a game about how to fall in love, and a game about how to fall out. Hey, I'm Finn, and today I wanted to talk about Florence. Quick note, one of the things that is changing about this channel in the 8 or 9, however many months have been gone, is that I will now be uploading videos that are both video and audio accessible. The purpose of this is to make it easier to watch while doing something else, or if you just don't care for the video, you can do it just fine. The only things you're going to be missing out on are sometimes locations, sometimes visual gags, and sometimes pieces of context, or, video grabs from the game or whatever I'm talking about. Florence opens up with a lovely introduction to our main character, Florence Yo, a 25-year-old woman doing her routines. She hits us with the good old double snooze, one timer set for 15 minutes after the other, before getting up and brushing her teeth. It's important to note here that the player has to do the brushing for her. It's up to the player to fulfill her routines. She makes her way to work, where on the bus the player works through her feed, fulfilling the repetitive and almost monotonous task of liking or reposting stories, which I speedrun every time. Then the player goes through her work, matching numbers in a perfectly routine office job. Florence then gets a call from her mother and runs through what feels like the usual practiced responses. The player then helps her eat, brush her teeth again, and get some sleep. I think it's important to look at Florence as a work of art, as something that someone put their heart and soul into, as something that was worked over and over and over until it eventually reached a state where it could be published. And when you get to that state, when you spend so much time with an art piece, why on earth would you make a game where you have to brush your teeth twice? Why would you make that decision? You would make that decision if you knew exactly what you were doing. See, these tasks are made to feel repetitive and routine. The muscle memory of our cursor movement and the fact that we have to do them is representative of Florence herself, slogging through her daily routine, falling into muscle memory from old repeated movements. This is one of the interesting advantages to video games. If they want to make something feel repetitive, they can just make you repeat it. In the next chapter, we follow Florence as she reminisces on old memories, finding a piece of art she had done when she was a child. As far as an art creation tool goes, I really do like the system they use here. I was unable to create what I would consider to be a proper penis out of these shapes, but instead I got this weird sort of chode piece, as you can see now. To refocus, however, she puts it away and continues about her day. The next day, while once again working through the monotony of liking people's stories, something changes, leading her to see this hunk of meat. And she doesn't do anything but listen for now. Use that new thing that you're choosing, get up and dance is moving. Episode 1. Hey, I'm Finn, and today I wanted to talk about the criminally underrated series Dance is Moving by Brian David Gilbert. It's hilarious, it lures you into a false sense of security, and then it violently rips the rug out from under you and you wonder what the point of life is. You'll probably know Brian David Gilbert from recently his work as the Winter Prince in Fiona and Cake, or his work as one of Polygon's members during the Unraveled series, or even some of his little skits here and there. But before most of those, him and his sister, Laura Catherine Gilbert, that's correct, made Dance is Moving. It's kind of a series of dance videos in the style of those old VHS style workout group videos, where the purpose is not only to do a fun dance, but also just to work out and get active, that kind of deal. The first episode of Dance is Moving is the Step Touch. It's a simple, snazzy dance move that's designed to get you through the dance of life. It's applicable in almost all songs, a revelation that pisses this guy off quite a lot for some reason. There's also a sweet little moment where Brian has an awkward little meet cute with one of his students.
What? No, alright.
It's more like he's a trainer. It's not like student. Like this is like a child. No, like these are like all adults and they're like in the same. Anyway, he and Megan have a sweet little interaction while episode 1 sets up the general format. It's a silly, happy little show about a man who loves dancing, trying to show other people how, just because he thinks it's fun and because he wants to share something important to him with other people. In the next act, we start to use these fun little focus sliders to find that the little cello himbo is currently out and about. This is actually a really fun and proper application of these like slider things, as Life is Strange attempted a similar concept, only their delivery was about half as successful in making something fun and far more successful at making me want to eat my keyboard and lacerate my throat with the unusable WASD keys. Anyway, Florence is so distracted by this absolute beefcake that she crashes her bike, falling to the pavement and seeing all her stuff come loose. The beefcake, seeing this, approaches and gives her a hand. By the time he leaves, she has his name and number, and a date at the ready. Krish. The two go on a date, and another stroke of genius comes into the game. See, during the date, the two communicate using these speech bubbles. At first, there's a lot smaller, more difficult pieces, like when you're first getting to know somebody and you don't really know what to say, and when you're kind of just trying to find the things that you have in common. But as the conversation goes on, the pieces start to get bigger. They start to come together much more easily. As you get to know each other, talking gets easier, more fluid, until you get to that last puzzle. This time, the other half moves to meet you. Of course, the pieces come together. Of course it's that easy. After all, they were made for each other. Next up, high knees. Now, this dance looks really silly, and I don't think anyone would ever recommend it like it's used doing a dance, but that's because it's a metaphorical thing for doing something scary or silly or otherwise worrying, but just doing it with enough confidence that it loops back around to being okay again. Basically, fake it till you make it. This confidence can manifest in doing a quite ridiculous dance with a fully serious expression, exuding so much confidence that people think maybe it is a real dance move, or it can manifest as doing something you're anxious to do with the confidence that you'll be okay. While the first dance was kind of symbolic of the comfort zone, it was something that was easy, repeatable, that worked in almost all situations, this one represents the confidence of breaking out of it. This manifests during the conversation with Megan, where BDG says, she said yes because my knees are high, where he really meant she said yes because I went in with confidence and I just full sent it. This is the start of Megan and BDG's relationship, a sweet little unionship based on a shared love of dance. In the next segment of Florence, we start to see the aspirations of our main characters. Krish talks to Florence about going to art school in a delightful scratch ticket mechanic that puts the agency on you to learn, making you be the one to seek out the information. Kind of the implication here is that to really get to know someone, you have to put in effort as well. And then she brushes her teeth again. But really interestingly, it's not up to the player. She just does it. Because that's not where her focus is, so the player shouldn't be there either. Instead, it's on that little forgotten box in her closet, the one with the old art. She holds it, then admires herself. Not only do you have to make an effort to understand other people, but you have to start scratching away at the person in the mirror until you realize that you need to put enough effort in to get to know yourself too. Krish inspires Florence to dream again, to have aspirations, just as she does for him by helping push him into music school. Florence literally pushes him into the doors of the Academy of Music, getting him outside of his comfort zone and making him want to start working toward his dreams. While he's at school, she sits in her room and begins to draw, a long-forgotten part of herself that Krish has helped rekindle. The two move in together and spend all their time together after a brief argument about groceries. In episode 3, Brian talks about crabs. Why does he decide to talk about crabs? Why sing about crabs? Because that's where he's from, silly Baltimore, the biggest city in the entire world. This song is filled with things to appreciate about Baltimore, but it also makes references to Baltimore holding Brian back. He's considering moving for work and for better opportunities, but he spent his whole life here. His friends are here. Everything he knows and has grown comfortable with is here. The next episode is Wiggle Arms. It's a fun one where they learn the dance that goes a little bit like this. This song is one of the first abstractions in the miniseries. See, at the end of the episode, it's decided that Brian David Gilbert is going to move, like what was set up in the Crab episode. He uses the dance to wish his friends goodbye, and a lot of people are gone at the end of the episode, revealing that the dance studio in the episode maybe isn't as literal as what we were led to believe. It seems that the group he's with is more representative of his friend group, or those he's able to keep in contact with. The dance, the main hobby, being one of the things that he keeps up with in this space, representative of what makes him up. Regardless, a lot of his friends are gone, but most importantly, he waves goodbye to Megan. And she's not there in the next episode. I want to spend more time talking about those groceries I mentioned earlier in Florence. During that argument, the mechanics stayed the same, but the art changed dramatically. Instead of the soft, rounded puzzle pieces we were used to for conversations, the dialogue bubbles turned into these sharp, boxy, and rigid things. This shows just how little of a conversation is actually happening, instead how much of an argument it is. Then, they become sharper, more jagged lines that dig into each other, as if to represent how the things we say stab into our partners. And then there's erosion. In this one, you're forced to push time forward, and as you do, you take each other's presence more and more for granted, going from cuddling to holding hands to standing side by side as two old friends might. Even Krish's greatest passion, music, becomes forgotten to his routines. As for Florence, despite being gifted a painting set she could use to hone her passion, she lets it sit and gather dust, forgotten under a stack of papers from work. And then there's another fight. This one is much more intense, switching to the angry blocks quicker. There's a fervor in this argument that the last one lacked, an intensity, a resentment that can only be shared by two people who understand too well how the other is. The next game was the first to ruin me. It's called drifting, and as the name implies, you have to solve what would be a simple jigsaw. The twist, however, is that it doesn't want to be held together. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, the pieces won't align quite right. In my playthrough, Florence's eyes were completely covered. Do with that what you will. What follows then is a second game of a similar type. This comes after the game makes you complete a more standard jigsaw puzzle from two separate piles, both parallel but unconnected. You can solve both halves, one side of the puzzle Krish, the other side Florence, but you can't make them whole. The pieces don't connect. You're left with two people, parallel but unconnected. In Dance is Moving, the next song is Partner Dancing. In this one, Brian gets everyone started. They all divide into pairs, revealing that the class has an odd number. There's no one for him to dance with. Still, dance is his passion, isn't it? He tries to keep going, to press on, but there's a current under him, the undeniable fact that he should be dancing with someone. If he had done things better, and if he hadn't moved, then he would be dancing. He attempts to get into his own groove, only to find that he can't at all. See, the little trick about 4/4 and the step touch working with every song doesn't actually apply here. As one commenter pointed out, the song is in a 3-time signature, completely clashing with the signature of the dance, making it unusable. I think BDG should have listened to that really angry guy earlier, might have taught him something new. Regardless, he can't dance. Instead, he checks his phone, and there's a message from Megan. She asks to talk. The rest of the episode follows the decline of he and Megan's relationship, contrasting BDG completely alone against the couples to show what he's missing. Touch, intimacy, stability. Instead, we see flashes of he and Megan arguing over the phone, getting increasingly upset. There's a game in Florence titled Let Go. Honestly, this single minigame deserves an entire video essay by itself, if I'm being honest. It depicts Florence walking side by side with Krish, but she's there, she's tangible, and so she leaves footsteps behind. Krish, however, is a memory. He leaves nothing that we or Florence can see. Nothing that anyone other than us can. After you start the game, you can't interact. No matter how far back he goes, how distant, any effort from the player and from Florence will make her freeze in place. She doesn't want to forget Krish, not really. So he catches up, and the game restarts, and the cycle of forgetting begins again. Any effort to speed up the process, to slow it down, to do anything relating to this person who spent so long by her side, it begins the cycle again. Florence falls back into routine, and the player has to brush her teeth again. I do not know the source of this quote. If anyone could help me find it, I've been looking for it for a while, but it's a post to the tune of, "You can never go back. You can kick and scream and cry, but you can never go back." Episode 6 of Dance is Moving, The Slow Worm, is burnout. The first form of burnout is his passion. He's slow, he doesn't want to dance, he simply moves. He goes through the motions of dance, but it's clear something is missing. The passion. Here's a really good shot where we see exactly what this is for BDG. Doing what he loved is a slog now. Even being with a person he loved is a slog now. It's staring at the soft light of a screen in the dead of the night, working toward compromises, trying to fix something that's clearly falling apart at the seams. Yet here he goes, through the motions, and so in dance he goes through the motions. And this depression further isolates him, driving the people around him away as his routine becomes the slog, barely moving, barely making his way through life, knowing things should be better, but they aren't. The last scene of this episode is Declan, the only other named character aside from Megan, admitting he won't be able to make it to dance class next week. And that leaves BDG alone. There's a scene in Florence that takes effort. She lays in bed and you have to repeatedly click her to get up. This is the first time waking up has required this much from the player, has been this demanding. And once you wake up, you find your paints. And you try art. It's weird to think that you could indulge in this art when Krish gave you that paint set, when it was him who fueled your passion, and when it was that other person that had driven you. But you paint. And the art supplies are here. Krish is not. You are still here, and half of you is not. And yet, you create. Brian walks onto stage. There is nobody else. He forces himself through the intro, reminiscing on how much this used to mean to him. The words aren't there this time. His friends aren't there this time. Even the music has abandoned him. He starts cleaning up. The camera disconnects, implying to the viewer that we're not watching things from the perspective of content anymore, from the camera. We're not watching it from the passion of production. And now we're watching Brian David Gilbert alone, at the hardest part of his journey, and he plays a song of his own, and he falls to the ground, and he leans his head down, just as we saw in the last video, in the slow worm. It's over for him. There is no motivation left. There is no reason to get out of bed. Happily ever after wasn't something said at weddings or in love stories. Originally, the expression was, and he lived happily in the ever after. It was said at funerals. It wasn't something sad, however. It was an understanding that this person isn't in our lives anymore. But that doesn't mean they weren't there. That doesn't mean they can't be better now. That doesn't mean we can't be better now. Even when we're alone. Even when everyone else we love in the world, or one person who felt like that whole world, leaves us, there's still the ever after. There's still a choice to be happy, even if that means being happy apart. And so, Florence strokes her brush across the page. You pull her through time as she paints more and more, passion rekindled by a gift given to her by someone who's finding his own ever after now. Florence seeks hers out. Her room is covered with life, with drawings, with colorful works of art that she was able to create. And then Brian taps his feet. It's to the tune of the step touch, 4-4. He pushes to his feet, continuing from there. Still, he hesitates. Is this what he should be doing? Is this really his passion anymore? What's the point if there's nobody to learn? If there's nobody but him? And then... I think there's two very telling things with these endings. The first is that Krish not only keeps the art set, but that's what got her going again. It's saying to me that she doesn't resent Krish for anything. She doesn't resent that their time had to come to an end. The second little thing is that Brian David Gilbert, he does the partner dance. The dance that was so sad in the original because he was doing it alone and he was abandoned by everyone else. Now he does it with confidence. He does it with long steps. He does it so in his element and so effortlessly that you can almost feel Megan's still there. Megan there for the first time, really. The sad, kind of shitty truth is that people will come and go from our lives. And the people who we think we'll be together with forever, sometimes we're not. But maybe they are still there, in a weird way. Maybe these people, the people we were when we loved them, or the people they were when they loved us, maybe they're still around, kicking inside of us, manifesting as paint strokes or dance moves or something else. People are complicated, shifting puzzles of identities and feelings, and love is just a very complicated abstraction of all of those combined. Two people might fit together like a puzzle one day, and the next they might not want to see each other anymore. They don't want to look at each other in the same way that they were able to before. That doesn't mean that you need to break the puzzle, though. Sometimes you can find new places for it to fit, or you can keep some of those pieces while letting the rest go. And you can take those pieces and the identity of the relationship that was there, of the two people that were there, can be mixed around. You can change the puzzle. There's no fault in that. There's no fault in growing up. There's no fault in aging. There's no fault in changing. That's what we are. We're all always changing. I'm Finn, and I will see you next time. Hopefully before 8 months pass.